Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for agreeing to hold a hearing on this subject regarding the relationship with Russia and its impact on transatlantic security. Your testimony this morning gives our members an opportunity to understand the administration's Russia reset policy and better appreciate the ongoing and evolving security challenges in Europe and Eurasia. This committee last met in March to discuss Russia and NATO when we received testimony from General John Craddock, who was until recently Commander, European Command, and Supreme Allied Commander. His testimony was insightful and came with much appreciated candor. General Craddock said that after the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there were no borders under threat of invasion in Europe and Eurasia. General Craddock continued, stating he thought that assumption has been proven false. General Craddock assessed that Russia's intent may be to weaken European solidarity and systematically reduce U.S. influence. As a result, since the Georgia conflict in August of 2008, EUCOM has called for a reevaluation of the strategic environment, which includes EUCOM's deliberative planning, a U.S. strategy for Russia, and an evaluation of U.S. force presence in Europe. That was the view of our top military commander back in March. Since that time, the administration's Russia reset policy has taken shape. While I want to make clear that I support engagement with Russia, I'm concerned that a grand bargain with Russia may risk the viability of the security architecture that has kept the European continent peaceful for nearly 60 years. Russian misdeeds and provocations in the recent past, as well as their planned European security treaty, suggest that the Kremlin seeks to weaken NATO, marginalize U.S. influence in Europe, and gain a veto over European security affairs. This is why I support NATO First policy, which would make clear to our NATO allies that U.S. bilateral engagement with Russia will not foster collective insecurity among our allies. I commend the Chairman for including in the NDAA many of the provisions from the bipartisan NATO First bill sponsored by Mr. Turner and Mr. Marshall, which takes legislative steps to strengthen transatlantic security. These provisions, to name a few, cover the START Treaty, long-range missile defense in Europe, and U.S. force presence in Europe. Vice President Biden's visit to Ukraine and Georgia last week was a step in the right direction, and his assessment that Russia used a pretext to invade Georgia demonstrated that the reset policy should not sugarcoat Russian behavior. Yet striking the balance of renewed engagement with Russia and supporting Central and Eastern European allies and partners is proving to be a challenge. In a July 15th open letter to President Obama written by 22 prominent Central and Eastern European figures expressed deep concern among America's Central and Eastern European allies over the implications of improved relations between Russia and the U.S. on their security and the transatlantic relationship. Following Vice President Biden's visit, Russia's envoy to NATO said that Russia considered the question of rearming Georgia more serious than whether Georgia enters NATO. Secretary Clinton quickly affirmed that the Obama administration considered Russia a great power and remains committed to reset bilateral relations. It's precisely this balancing act that played out in the headlines this week that I'd like our witnesses to discuss today. How do we ensure that our bilateral agreements with Russia don't compromise our commitment to transatlantic security? This leads me to a number of specific concerns. What kind of military-to-military relationship do we expect to have with Georgia and Ukraine, and will EUCOM continue its deliberative planning? With respect to European missile defense, I'd like to understand how the reset policy has affected NATO's support of European missile defense. In particular, the impact it has had on Poland and the Czech Republic, as well as the administration's missile defense review. With respect to the START Treaty, that many of us in the House have concerns about how START may impact the nuclear triad, considering the announced reductions in strategic delivery vehicles to between 500 and 1,100. The administration's nuclear posture review, which frames the military's nuclear requirements, advanced conventional capabilities and space capabilities, enhancing the reliability, safety, and security of our strategic nuclear forces, and the needed modernization of our aging nuclear weapons complex, and finally the large number of Russian tactical nuclear weapons deployed near Europe. In addition to hearing your views on these specific concerns, I'm interested in the administration's views on the provisions in the House-passed NDAA that address these issues. Finally, I hope your testimony today will cover the recommendations of the Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States. In particular, I'm interested whether the administration will adopt two of the Commission's unanimous findings and recommendations. Number one, that the United States must retain nuclear weapons until such time as the international environment may permit their elimination globally. And two, the United States must also continue to concern itself with issues of deterrence, assurance, and stability in the nuclear relationship with Russia. As you can see, there's a lot to cover today, and I look forward to your testimony and hope that the discussion we have today will give this Congress and the American people a better understanding of the U.S.-Russia security relationship. Thank you very much. I yield back.